And good morning, everyone. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, fantastic things that we all love, know, and enjoy. And you're protecting us. And if nobody else says it, I'm going to say it. Doug's going to say it. Thanks. We really appreciate all that you do for food. If you're new to the chat, pull up a chair. My name is Brian Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we go live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we discuss a food safety topic. And one of the first things that you're going to notice, not a lecture, right? We're here to interact, have a good time, and hopefully share a little bit of knowledge that you may not know. And really, with guests like Dr. Marshall, that's always the case. Every time Doug and I talk, I always learn something new. So very happy to have Doug on the show this morning. How are you doing, Doug?
Fantastic, Brian. Good to be here again.
And from our pre-chat show, you have been a road warrior recently, it sounds like, going out and helping clients and working out there. And I know they appreciate it. And for you to come here on the Friday and meet up with the chat, always happy for that. So thanks for doing that.
Hey, this is as much therapy for me as it is anything else.
And people are starting to file in here. So, oh, good. Tim's home. Tim's another road warrior on LinkedIn. He is constantly posting. And so he has some really cool pictures of kiddos playing with the snow in Nashville. So glad that Tim is back home. And if you are new to the chat, you may not know this, but one of the things we love to do here is put in where in the world you're at. I'm in Loveland, Colorado, which is a little north of Denver. And along that same path, Doug is in this area as well, too, right up in Fort Collins. Beautiful area of the country that we live in.
Brian and I, we occasionally have snowball fights, so just keep that in mind. You know, when we need to blow off steam, we just, hey, Brian, you outside scooping snow today? Yeah. Hey, look out.
Elena, good morning to you. Good to see you. Gosh, we have a ton to go over here today, and one of the things, and so on the last show, Doug, I made a bold prediction. I predicted that for 2025, when all the numbers are rolled up at the end of the year and FDA tells us the leading recalls and food safety instances for 2025, the top three are going to be these: allergens, foreign material, and listeria and salmonella contamination. The order may change, but that's my prediction. And any challenges to that?
Well, I think the take-home message, and this list hasn't changed really much in the last 10 years, but an easy conclusion to make is the food manufacturing industry does a crappy job controlling allergens. Pure and simple.
Absolutely. Megan's here. And Jose, good to see Jose. Welcome, my friend. People are filing in here. So one of the things that we do to torture my guests and participants on the chat, Doug, is the dad joke torture. Are you ready?
Yes. No. Go.
Tough. You're getting it anyway. What do bacteria use to communicate with each other? A cell phone. PC's here. Good morning, PC. Yeah, I was waiting for you to say plasmid, but
not all. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'd reference this a little bit. So one of Doug's functions, which he performs very, very well at Eurofins, is he helps people, and I think that's kind of a cool aspect of what you do, and it's an advantage of if you're a client of Eurofins, and they do an amazing job, is when people have questions, or if it's worse, where people need actual boots on the ground help for a really serious issue, depending on his schedule and availability, which of course is not the best, Doug's there to pitch in a hand and provide expertise and information. So what you see on the chat here is what Doug is up to a lot of the time, is providing his expertise out there and not living in an ivory tower, using his expertise in microbiology to help people solve real world issues, which is super cool. And I back when I was at Eurofins, you and I would hit the road every now and then, go out and visit clients, and it's always it's always an important thing because, the theoretical side of things are nice, but it's not what gets things done. And at the end of the day, it's not what is important, right? It's that family element. And we'll dive into that topic. But first, I almost forgot our sip of the day. So everybody join us. Cheers. Very nice, Pavana. Good morning to you. And so we wanted to kind of start with that. And our topic today is allergens. We're seeing lots of activity around allergens. We'll get a little bit into this on what FDA is up to. But again, that's the theoretical side of things. So really with the allergen side of things, Doug, it's personal for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I live in a household where I have individuals have multiple food allergies. And I'm going to put a list together for you, and I want you to think about the foods that we have to exclude from our household and what it must be like for us if we go on a family vacation somewhere and we are 100% reliant on a retailer or a food service operator for our life, quite frankly. So anyway, here's the list. So it's beef, chicken, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, anything with wheat, not just gluten, but wheat. So it's not a gluten allergy or a gluten intolerance. It's an allergic reaction to wheat. So that excludes breads, flour used to thicken gravies, etc. And that includes all wheat species. Some of the ancient grains are off the table for us. Oats. So if you want to think about something that you would eat for breakfast, all breakfast cereals are now off the table. So, our household has a very limited choice in the kinds of foods that we can make at home. And when we're on the road, it's even worse.
Oh.
So I will also tell you that I have had to rescue a family member from a severe allergic reaction by using an EpiPen. Wow. So that's what I mean by people's lives are at stake when allergens are not under control. And I am disturbed when we look at these recall data that allergens is usually number one.
Yeah.
So that's my personal thinking and personal lifestyle associated with uncontrolled food allergens.
And with that, there's an incredible level of trust, right? So you go to a restaurant, you're sitting down to order, you're talking with the waiter, and you're like quizzing them, right? It's like, does this contain wheat? And this has a breading on it. What's in it? And the waiter's like, maybe. Well, can you kind of go find out because I can't eat maybe.
Well, food servers, bless their souls, are completely clueless. They just honestly have no idea. And so what we do is we carry with us business cards that list the allergens. And depending where we travel here in the US, that's in English and in Spanish, because people in the back of the house, English may not be their native language. And so we give that to the server and we say, look, suggest something off of the menu that you think might work for whomever is at the table. And then take this in the back of the kitchen and confirm that, in fact, they can make this dish that doesn't have these allergens in it. So most of the time that works. But usually you're limited to, okay, you want fried salmon or grilled salmon? Green beans with butter or without butter? Oh, I also forgot many of us are lactose intolerant, so let's take dairy off the table. And maybe a baked potato, dry. Ugh, imagine eating that every other day.
That's fun. Yeah. And not to also mention, the dishes themselves with potential ingredients, but also cross-contamination. Right? So are they using cutting boards that have those allergens present and they're just kind of throwing stuff around back there? That's a hidden risk that's almost impossible to find out unless you go back and inspect the damn kitchen yourself. Oof, who's got time for that? That's hard. Elena likes your idea with the cards in English and Spanish. That's a good idea. Yeah, so I agree. Very good idea. Oops. Good morning, Tyler. Hitting that button once too much. So helping companies control allergens is very personal for you. And one of the things, without getting into the details, right? This is kind of almost, we're looking at this as a refresher. And so number one is we're rooting this back to why we're doing this, right? And as food safety and quality people, we always need to remember that is that we're doing this to protect people, right? It's not to get product out the door. It's not to meet the production inventory. It's to provide product that people trust. And that trust, oh my God, is so important. So for one of my clients, they had sent in a complaint and say, hey, listen, for this product that you make, my child is very, very allergic and they had a reaction. We're trying to narrow it down. And they're talking with you saying, well, is there any allergens in these products? And in these particular products, there aren't. But there was still something that happened. So then that mother had responded back saying, okay, well, that's good to know, but I still can't take the risk. I can't buy your products. It's like, oh, right. That's hard. And what if you're dealing in that realm, there's no half-eat. You have to be sure. And if you think that trust has been broken in some way, that relationship you can't rebuild. Once that's gone, it's gone. And so I think that's an important lesson to us remember from a food safety standpoint.
Yeah, let me give you an example of where some manufacturers believe there is a middle ground, and that's a precautionary statement on a label. And the one that drives me batty is processed in a facility that also handles whatever the list of allergens they choose to declare. So if you are an allergen sensitive individual, how do you interpret that statement on a label? So if your allergens and allergenic ingredients aren't listed as an ingredient in the ingredient statement, you're going, yay, this has potential. And then at the bottom, there's a precautionary statement. And so, like our example in my household, many allergen sensitive people will go ahead and try that product because their food choices are so limited that they are going to cross their fingers and trust that the manufacturer really doesn't have an allergenic protein from the may contain or process in a facility that also processes kinds of foods. And so, everybody's tolerance level for exposure differs. And a lot of people will take a bite and they will get the early sensations of an allergy response and they'll stop.
Oof.
They might pop a Benadryl immediately to be somewhat proactive with symptoms, but they obviously hope it doesn't escalate. So, putting those labels on really is not a discouragement to prevent an allergen sufferer from actually trying your product. Wow. So that's one of the hazards out there is if you do kill someone, and that is an outcome of an allergic response is death, imagine the plaintiff's lawyer, when they're looking at your product, they're looking at your label statements, and they see a precautionary statement. Does that mean you are a negligent food manufacturer? And if you convince a judge or a jury that, in fact, that is clear evidence that you are a negligent food manufacturer, what hope do you possibly have winning a lawsuit or limiting the damages?
Right. And yeah, the courts aren't stupid. If you are putting on may contain statements and you're doing that to, as is said right here with Tim, as a CYA, they're gonna figure that out. It's like, okay, so you're just a lazy manufacturer who's putting this on here because you don't want to clean. That's no excuse. It's like from our early example with the restaurant, when you ask the waiter, does this contain allergens? And they're like, maybe, right? That doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're playing Russian roulette. And recently, right, there was a warning letter around this too, where a large bakery got their hand slapped for this, right?
Yeah, there was a bakery that had sesame in some of their SKUs, but not all, and probably not most. And so when sesame was added as the big number 9 in the
Mhm.
regulated allergens, um, rather than somehow segregating their production lines, doing schedule differences after cleaning, validating a cleaning process to remove sesame, they decided to. There's a couple ways you could play this. It's not just this one bakery, but they decided to just add sesame on the ingredient label for non-sesame containing products. So there was no sesame in the formulation, yet in the ingredient statement, they had the word sesame. Well,
Mm.
that's mislabeling, okay?
Yeah.
Blatant mislabeling. And so the other thing that it does is, and this is the scary part for me, if you are a regular customer of this bakery brand and you knew which products had sesame, which ones weren't, and you were sensitive to sesame, you have become accustomed to buying the products without sesame.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, there may be sesame in the product.
Mhm.
Even worse would be an example of bakeries that just started adding sesame
Yeah, just a little.
to every product so that it wasn't mislabeling. And that would be a potentially awful outcome because, again, when you get used to buying a product, do you really look at the label every time you pull it off the shelf before you buy it?
Yeah.
No, okay, this one's safe, this one's safe, this one's safe. And then all of a sudden, boom, what the heck? Oh, there's now sesame in this product. So the bottom line here is, and from a brand protection perspective, this is horrible marketing. I
Yeah.
mean, can you dream up a more horrible marketing campaign than to fail on your allergen control program? No.
Yeah. Terrible. And it's, in my view, right, and this is my opinion on this, is really what you're hearing when you see these type of labels. This is the legal group talking, right? It's like, okay, we're going to do all these things to protect the company without realizing the damage they're doing to their brand and their reputation in the marketplace. It's like it's you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I remember a situation when the first allergen labeling law came into effect. There was a manufacturer of baking soda. One ingredient in baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, an inorganic salt. Yet, at the bottom of the label, they had a precautionary statement.
Oh, jeez.
May contain, and they listed all the regulated food allergens. You know, what?
Yeah.
What makes you think that's going to protect you um, from causing someone to get sick consuming baking soda?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Crazy. Yeah. So we wanted to kind of give everybody a quick, refresher here on allergens and management in the plant, because all of this information comes back to us as food safety people, right? And putting the systems and programs in place. And we'll start with allergen management 101, right? Because there's two main categories that you need to decide first. And sometimes there's hybrids, but there's two categories, right, Doug? Dry cleaning and wet cleaning, right? You got to get those allergens out of there, and you have to figure out what type of plant you have, and that's your starting point. So any comments around at a high level how to look at those?
well, a simple answer is dry cleaning is really, really, really challenging,
Mhm.
particularly if your allergens are part of a powder. And so, for example, if you're dry blending multiple SKUs with multiple different allergens, to do a process changeover going from one SKU to another SKU that you can effectively remove allergens from equipment and the processing environment is, again, really, really challenging. So many people have not validated their dry clean process.
Mm.
So they will rely on indicators, visual assessment. Yeah, the surface looks like the powder has been removed. I've got my ATP meter. I will swab the surface. My ATP comes back within spec, whatever your spec limit is. But they are either afraid or they don't know that you really need to swab that surface for the allergen you're trying to control to make sure that it has been removed. So the use of cleaning cloths, the use of high pressure air, those tools, you might be able to get surfaces visually clean, but you're just blowing the allergen all throughout the room. So really challenging.
Yeah. And with dry operations as well, they go a long time between tear down cleanings, because it's if you have, picture this, a giant plant that is drying flour or something like this and producing flour. Shutting that stuff down, extremely expensive. You have to keep it running for long periods of time. So that means between your serious tear down cleanup procedures in a dry plant, you have long periods of time. So that means that you've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds potentially involved in a recall. And if you're producing these base commodities, they go into everything. Hey, so back to your restaurant scenario. So you have a dry manufacturer who is producing an allergen-free product that may be in a plant with another allergen. How are they separating all of that? And to your point, how do you know? And that's the real kicker, right? So if you're that manufacturer, how do you know? And that gets back to your point around validation. So I know this is something you've been working on quite a bit here recently, Doug. What are some tips and ideas around that important piece with validation?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. If we're just going to talk for a little bit here on dry cleaning, every facility is different. Every product soil is different. So worst case scenarios would be, pasta dough or cookie dough, or things with ground peanuts or ground almonds or something, these sticky tacky materials. Literally, you're looking at Jeremy Adler turned me on to this concept, a product called EG6000. You can't buy it on any store, but it's about the only tool you have, and that's elbow grease with 6,000 strokes to manually remove debris that is adherent to equipment. So by far and away, that is the craziest approach and the most laborious, the most time consuming and costly, and quite frankly, not usually very effective.
Yeah.
So what I always look for are ways in which you can disassemble those pieces of equipment, clean parts out of place rather than try and clean it in place.
Yeah.
And then take those parts into a dedicated allergen washroom, which I don't know of anybody I've ever visited who has one of those, but that would be a best practice. And, use water to dissolve those soils, remove those, rinse that soil debris away, and, use detergents as needed. But those are just some things that you can do to improve the odds you're going to effectively remove allergens from those kinds of pieces of equipment.
Yep. And that's an important lesson for this, is that if FDA comes into your plant and says, okay, well, we do these type of things, right? They want proof that it's been removed. And as Cortland is saying here too, thanks, Doug, appreciate it. Allergen, not adequate, right? If you were to roll up to FDA and say, hey, here's my ATP testing for allergens, they're going to go, what? Those two things don't match up, right? So you're telling me that a energy molecule from bacteria and its lack of presence in product equals lack of allergen presence? Explain that to me, right? That's not going to go very well. So part of this, and Tim is talking about this too, right? Where you are looking at compressed air and all these other nightmares with these systems. And you have to validate that process. I remember back in a previous company I was at, we had a plant that manufactured soy milk, and we added almond milk to that plant. What a nightmare. Because it was all the same equipment. The plant would have to shut down and switch over and make the different products. We brought in sanitation companies. We brought in allergen experts. We brought in hygienic design people, and we completely revamped that plant. And we would run those first CIP cycles on the equipment. And we would have to CIP for 18 hours to get that equipment clean. Almond paste is, oh my God, it's like take peanut butter and now increase the stickiness by 10. And that's frickin' almond paste. And we finally got to that point, and we did it the right way, which is then we had this extremely strong testing protocol we put in place. And then we would evaluate rinse waters through the entire process at the end of the CIP and test those for allergens. In this, in the beginning, we would look to see if there was residual soy, right? Because we didn't want cross-contamination either. Mm-hmm. And we would test for these allergens, so almond and soy. And if there was anything there, nope, do it again. Nope, do it again. And then we would go back and troubleshoot to figure out, based upon those different results in that plant, where the area was that we weren't getting clean enough. And we did a calculation on the batching tank at the beginning of the process. Not a very big tank, Doug. It was made like a 10,000 gallon tank. And inside that tank, we calculated so if you had the tip of this pen, mm-hmm. that much residual almond in that entire tank on the surface was enough to have a positive result in that test. Right? Minuscule.
Yeah, testing for both validation and verification. I work for a testing company, so I probably should mention this. There are many allergen test kits on the marketplace, and some have limited detections that are greater than others. And again, if you want to be the person responsible for your allergen control program, I would encourage you not to choose the easy to use kinds of tests that have limited detections, in the 3, 4, 5 ppm range, when there are tests available that are sensitive down to 2.5 or 1 ppm. So, mm-hmm. You're talking about a 50% loss of sensitivity on the low end up to over 100% difference in sensitivity, depending on which kits that you use. Mm-hmm. And so, the regulatory limit in the U.S. for allergens is 0. Now, we can't measure 0, but, if you really want to make sure your programs are working, I would encourage you to choose the appropriate test method that gives you that level of security. Again, if you're using a method that has a high LOD, if you're the plaintiff's lawyer, now you've just given them ammunition to prove that you might be a negligent food manufacturer.
Exactly. Well, and then on that subject as well is sampling itself. Right? So what are you doing? If you're using a little swab and going, boop, on a surface, no, that doesn't work, right? That's why other tests, which are better at getting samples, like rinse water testing, you're getting a larger sample for a larger area. You need to be very aggressive in going in there and really getting good samples so you can evaluate this.
Another very simple tool that we know of that may not be widely known in the food manufacturing sector is, you could buy these allergen swabs that are dry. Mm-hmm. If you dip them into sterile buffer, that hydration helps pick up allergen residue off a surface. So just a little sampling technique like that improves the odds you'll find allergens.
Right. Well, and it gets back to what Cortland is saying here is validation is continuous, not just 3 and out, right? It's like you just can't validate your process and then walk away. So this needs to be part of your change management process and making sure that things are anytime anything's changing. So you change your contract with your chemical sanitation company. Right? Okay, did that impact my ability to clean off residue within my process? which is the next piece, what you mentioned, Doug, is verification. So best practice is, okay, you set up these programs, you know that it works, you've identified this over time. Now you've got your verification step. How are you at the end of your sanitation process verifying that there are no allergens on that equipment? That's the proof that you're going to need to show to FDA or consumers or whatever you're going to recall, God forbid, of, yeah, we did a good job of cleaning this equipment and there was no allergens present. Now, also, then we're not going to dive into this too much, but now also think about all these programs have to be in place for your suppliers. Right? You're only as strong as your weakest link. So what are your suppliers doing for allergen control? And you probably are going to have to do more than just sending out the little questionnaire of, do you have this? Yes, no, yes, no, yeah. Right? If that questionnaire comes back and it's a may contain, you need to figure out what's going on, because that's going to impact you directly. And you just can't say, no, okay, well, we'll just do some testing and finished product. No, everything is constantly changing on these processes. So thanks for bringing that up, Cortland. So verification and validation have to be absolutely core to your process. You just can't set it and forget it with allergens.
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing on supplier verification. Remember, you have an obligation to know what your supplier is doing, and an on-site visit's pretty important for allergen management, simply because that supplier may not reveal to you all the other SKUs that they manufacture, or they may co-man for a brand owner, and they may not really know what the ingredients are going into that other product. So if they're all using shared equipment, there has to be some sort of validated changeover. And as we just talked about, those aren't easy to do.
Yeah, there's a reason why in FSMA, for your preventive controls, right, your most important programs, allergens and supplier, right, those are in there. And of course sanitation, right, all these things linked together. Another way that, kind of looking at the bigger picture again, and this is something that was the bane of my existence in the past, is marketing claims and labeling, right? And so you're the consumer, right? Back to you, making this personal for our conversation. You're out shopping, Doug, and you're looking at labels, trying to figure out, number one, you've got your safe list, right? Okay, these are the things that I know from past experience are good. I hope to God they didn't change anything. And then there's label claims. So, oh boy, this gets difficult, right? This is back to your point earlier. Marketing wants to say on the packaging, soy-free, almond-free, dairy-free. Oh boy, that's got some implications, doesn't it, when you say free?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ingredients that the industry has been struggling with for a number of years, and I'll just call them out. Let's say soy protein is the allergen that we're trying to manage, and you've got ingredients such as soy oil or soy lecithin.
Right.
And so both of these ingredients are refined. So there are a number of cleanup steps necessary to get to a clean vegetable oil made out of soy lipid. And there are a bunch of refining steps to be able to get to a very simple phospholipid called lecithin that's used as an emulsifier, also from a soy source. And so, you've got soy as the descriptor for the ingredient. However, you can source allergen-free soy oil and perhaps allergen-free soy lecithin.
Yes.
So when you put those on your label, you would put soybean oil or maybe vegetable oil, whatever that means, and maybe lecithin. Lecithin also can come from eggs. So if you're allergic to eggs, you might want to know that. But what do you need to put precautionary allergen declaration when you're using highly refined soy oil purchased from one of two manufacturers who have the evidence that says there's no soy protein in this oil? And so, again, even companies that are doing the right thing to make sure their products are allergen-free, you still have this labeling conundrum if you're a user of those ingredients.
Yeah. And yeah, so I've had those conversations. You have to have some pretty in-depth conversation with these type of oil suppliers to make darn sure that their oil is protein free. And FDA recognizes that. Now, if I'm in the plant, am I going to want to do some lot testing of new materials coming in to verify that? It'd be a good practice, right? Mistakes happen. Mistakes happen. So you want to make sure. And the pure, for lack of a better word, the oil, the higher your chance of having those proteins. So it's kind of like olive oil, right? If you're doing the extra virgin first press, you're going to have stuff in there. So you need to be extra careful on that. The zero claim is a very difficult thing on labels. So if you have soy free, or it's like, okay, if you're running food safety and managing allergens, how do you deal with that? Because that means zero. So if you're testing, and this gets kind of into this gray area as well too, and I'm curious about your thoughts around this, Doug, is groups that research allergens and reaction levels and severities like FARP at the University of Nebraska, they try and establish thresholds. And again, these are just based upon epidemiology. This isn't one size fits all. So let's say theoretically they say, okay, well, a typical trigger threshold level is 5 ppms for this allergen. And you've got to test sensitivity on this allergen that, to your point, is able to go down to 1 ppm. And your package says 0. And you test 1. Well, now you're in a conundrum because clearly your product is mislabeled. You're presenting a claim that's not true. So that's from that standpoint, right? It always comes back to adulteration and misbranding, right? That's always the base level. But now you have a product that may not cause a reaction, right? So a lot of times I've seen this where companies fight about this, right? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, FDA did open the window to allow companies to make the argument that the level of allergenic protein in their product or their ingredient is at a level that would be of insignificant risk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one could interpret that as zero risk, but these risk assessments, you're really looking at how many lives are we worth losing if a consumer ate a product where maybe the sensitivity threshold is 5 ppm, the measurement threshold on a swab or a per gram piece of that food might be 1 ppm. If it comes back positive at 1 ppm, how much of that food would the most sensitive consumer have to eat before it kills them? Is it 1 serving? Is it 100 servings? So these risk-based calculations are just that. We honestly don't know what the true head count is going to be with dead bodies. And, eventually we have to get to a point as a society where we're willing to accept that we might sacrifice 1, 5, 10 people a year because we've raised the threshold limit to something other than 0.
Yeah.
It's much like, driving an automobile. We've got 60,000 people in the U.S. die every year in automobile accidents. Well, if you're a risk assessor, your prevention is to stop allowing humans to drive cars.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance. Well, how is society going to appreciate that risk reduction strategy? They're not. Right. So, society is willing to accept. But look at all the preventive controls we have around driving 4,000-pound missiles at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Stop signs, speed signs. We've got verification cops on highway. We have, airbag. We have just a ton of process controls to try and reduce the number of people who die in car wrecks.
Right.
And so, those of us in food manufacturing, we're not quite that complicated, are we? We don't have tons of these preventive controls, but we're getting more and more as consumers start complaining to legislators and to regulators. I'm tired of having to stand here and provide testimony that my child died because of
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
When they ate food.
It's really easy to talk in theoretical terms until it's actual people, right?
Mhm.
And you're talking with someone that this actually impacted their lives. I've actually in my past working like it with granola products got stuck in this situation where we had a zero claim and there was a test that showed limits below a potential trigger threshold, and I'm like, nope, throw it away. This is not going out in the marketplace. It doesn't meet the claim. This is not what our was it a popular decision? No, of course not.
Yeah.
But part of it too then is understanding, especially when you get into grain products, right? We don't want to get too far down in the weeds here, but even USDA recognizes, based upon the transportation system for raw agricultural commodities for different types of grains, that there's gonna be some mixing. You can't completely get every single little thing out, so do the best you can, type thing.
Yeah, and one of my favorite products that I've really become an avid consumer of is GMO-free, allergen-free water, gluten-free water. I mean, that stuff is so safe. It's amazing.
And I saw you drinking that this morning, so obviously,
Yeah,
yes, you're
exactly.
a big advocate.
But I haven't validated my dishwasher to remove the allergen that we had with dinner last night. So
get some home test kits and. So part of this with this marketing claim, right, and this is something we talk about on the chat quite a bit, is there's all the technical aspects of everything that we're talking about. You need to, in your company, work with and educate your marketing teams when they're preparing product labeling for these potential risks so that they understand what's going on. And that needs to get up to the senior level in the company as well. We need to get out of our bubble and explain these risks and do that in human terms. This is how we can potentially impact our consumers. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep our consumers alive. That's a good thing. And teaching that information and providing that expertise outside of the group. Because a lot of times, if marketing people, they'll look at competitor sets and markets and see what claims other people are making in that set, and you'll get the argument of, well, everybody else is doing it type thing. You need to be able to explain that why that's not a good idea.
Yeah, I'll give you an example where we had a marketing-driven initiative that resulted in an out-of-control allergen issue. So the geniuses in sales and marketing, pardon my pun there, said we need to increase the viscosity of our product because we've done some more sensory testing and consumers prefer a thicker pour than the thin pour that we currently have in our product. Okay, so now we were going to add a thickening agent. So they started adding starch. That's cornstarch, so it's not from a recognized food allergen. But what happened was the viscosity was increased so much that their prior cleaning validation was no longer working. And the company did not do a revalidation because they were, they had an allergen in the product in one of the SKUs that required a changeover when moving to other SKUs. And they were not effectively cleaning just because of a viscosity change in the formulation.
Wow. Yeah, it goes back to what we started this conversation with, right? Change management of your food safety plan, super, super important. So one of the things we wanted to briefly talk about, and I will put this document in the locals group for download. So again, I'll put the link in for that too, because it's free, is a fun little document that FDA put out, which has a couple of interesting things in here that I wanted to go over, Douglas. And so this is kind of arranged as a Q&A, because you can tell as we're going through the chat here today, a lot of things that you need to work through to figure out what's right for your company. But within this, it goes through this guidance for industry. So there was a couple of things here, Douglas, that I would like to get your thoughts around. And the first was this. And I'm going through here, and FDA is going through here talking about on page 6, reusable bulk containers that are, we all do this in the food industry. Let's say you're bringing in materials from suppliers, or let's say that you're shipping out some liquid materials in these bulk containers, right? This is a pallet configuration that you can then put on a truck. Let's say send to another company that buys this from you. It never sees retail. FDA is saying you have to label this. if it contains allergens. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I'll give you another example that I see with some regularity, and that's reusing super sacks.
Oh,
So a super sack comes in with a blend or a single ingredient. The contents get used, and then the super sack gets used as an intermediary collection container during processing.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have abundant opportunity to cross-contact different allergens in a super sack. And so, I'll just pose the question to the audience. Do you know of any sticky labels that will stay on a super sack? Or should that be a one-time use item?
Right.
So, yeah, we've got a tote here labeled. What about a tanker truck?
Yeah, definitely,
Or
right.
Polyline boxes. Can you just pull the polyliner out, put a new polyliner in?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of label do you put on that box when you've done that kind of changeover?
Right. And so if you're the receiving plant in this scenario with these bulk totes, okay, like this example here, it says contains milk. Okay, fine. What other allergens are being shipped out of that plant that's manufacturing this that are also using those totes? Let's say they're doing a milk product and a soy product in these containers. How do they keep them separate? Because once that label comes off, I don't know which one had it in there. How do you clean these things? Right? Stick a hose in it? What? Extremely difficult to clean. There's not a CIP system you can hook up to it. How is the manufacturing location keeping these things separate and segregated? You may be bringing in allergens through these bulk systems that you're not even aware of. So be interesting to see how this develops out. Another interesting point on that is they do talk about this in here too, Doug, about tankers, is that they say that bulk tankers are exempt from labeling. Doesn't keep you from sticking your nose in there, because that is a huge potential risk. There was a large recall a number of years ago that I think you probably remember as well in Minnesota, with a company that was bringing in bulk liquid eggs in tankers. And there was a huge cross-contamination event there, which resulted in a huge recall from those tankers. So this is where you kind of, if you're in food safety, you need to put on your logistics hat and start talking with the companies that are doing your washes for these bulk tankers. Whose are they? How are those things moving around? Are they doing a kosher wash? That may be a good subject for a future chat, is management of bulk tankers and how those darn things are cleaned and how they're managed, right? It's a potential issue that you need to be aware of. The other thing that very interesting piece on this is around here on page 1415. Sorry about the scrolling, guys. Is they're listing out your allergens, right? Okay, great. Here's all different types of allergens that we're talking about here. We're all familiar with these, and they give some examples. All right, great. Then down here, they start talking about it in more detail, and this caught my eye. This is a dog not barking, and this is something in food safety that I think we forget about, right? We like looking at the things we can see and hear and touch, and we understand those. Sometimes it's the stuff that is not making noise that you need to think about too. So be aware of that. But in this list of tree nuts, right? So we got almonds, walnuts, right? All this fun stuff we're seeing here. Yeah. Okay, great. There's something missing from this list, Doug, that used to be there.
Yeah, coconut is no longer a regulated allergen. So that's, if you're in the coconut procurement and producing and buying sectors, hallelujah for you.
Yeah. So now it's like you can change all your labels, and yeah, the coconut one is something that got me in the past with a potential issue that I had to work through with FDA. So I learned a lot about coconut, and it's not even a tree. It's not even a tree. It's a grass. And the original cases back to that, there wasn't even really a very good direct linkage to that. But what's interesting about this, and this goes to something we talk about on the chat as well, is don't forget that regulatory agencies are governmental agencies. They're political. They're scientific, but they're also political. Is FDA going out and trumpeting this change for coconut? They are not, right? They're being very, very quiet. Why? Because if something happens, they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want a headline that says FDA removes coconut from allergen list and people are getting sick. Here's poor little Timmy who has a coconut allergen, right? And now FDA is like, right? And they get hauled up in front of Congress. They don't want that.
Oh, hey, Brian, this brings up a fantastic point. We spend all of our efforts trying to control the regulated food allergens.
Mm-hmm.
But remember that people can be allergic to other foods that are not on the regulated list.
Yeah.
Yet their personal management strategy is exactly the same as if you were allergic to something on the regulated list.
Yes.
So everything you talk about trying to control the regulated allergens is also true for every other ingredient that you're using.
Yes. Mustard, lupins, other things. So if you're dealing with other countries, they have different allergen lists, right? They have reached different conclusions from an epidemiological standpoint of what they should be concerned about. Does that mean once those potential allergens are in the US that they magically do not become allergens? No, right? There's still people who are sensitive and allergic to those type of things as well. So you need to look at this, and I think this is a big chunk of our conversation. We'll kind of circle back at this toward the end. Is risk, right? A big chunk of this is figuring out this risk, and allergens can be kind of weird in that way.
Here's a quick puzzler for you, Brian, and I know you have the right answer because I don't. How about edible seaweed? Or processed seaweed? So, we harvest kelp to make carrageenan, which is a viscosity aid agent. We use edible kelps as salad ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
We use, pressed seaweed as a sushi ingredient.
Sushi, yes.
What's in the water along with the seaweed? Are there crustacea? Are there mollusks? Are there finfish?
Mm-hmm.
Are crustacea, mollusks, and fish on the regulated allergens list?
I think they are.
Yeah. And so this gets back to unintentional, I'll call it agricultural, even though it's not really, I guess, technically agricultural by definition, but it's one and the same. It's harvesting material for food use. And so I've often wondered what those industries are doing and thinking about with incidental cross contact just based on where the harvestable materials are growing.
That's a good point. And I've actually done a little research into this for my clients. Here's a fun project for everybody. If you got a little bit of time, go out and search manufacturing for this. You're going to get lovely pictures of people in Africa in shallow waters growing this stuff in little ponds with sticks and strings and growing these things and then bringing them out and then drying them on the shores and whatever else. Very similar to like Cortland's kind of talking about cocoa, right? Very manual mom and pop type operations to gather and collect this stuff. Are they doing that correctly? It's and the crossover here, as Cortland's talking about, he's a lot of experience in cosmetics and other areas as well. And that's a big problem too in cosmetics is, you're putting stuff on your face and it's got allergens in it, right? Or it's, got other types of bacterial contaminants that are in there causing all kinds of grief. Got to be careful with this stuff. And you have to understand how these things are being done. Another trend out there, Doug, that I wanted to quick comment on here before we run out of time is I'm seeing this more and more, and I buy these products for my dog from a company, is pet food that's now being labeled as human grade. We make human grade pet food. What in the world does that mean? And does all of these allergenic requirements apply to that? If you're making...
Okay. Yeah, great question. I've heard a quote. I do not know the source. I do not know the validity of the data. But the quote is that a significant portion of people who live below the poverty level will supplement their diet with cheap pet foods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there is a brand on the marketplace, been around for a long time. Their commercials are just absolutely elegant. I think it's called Fancy Feast. So they put the food on a pedestal with a candle, just beautifully composed picture. It's like, this is the best caviar that we have for your cat. But they present it as something that would be suitable for fine dining for humans.
I remember, yeah. And then they would hit the edge of the crystal glass, ding,
Yeah.
bon appetit, right? And the cat would come up. Yeah. I remember those.
So, marketers will do whatever it takes to sell their product and to differentiate their product from the competitors. So I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what the definition of human grade pet food is, but quite frankly, FDA considers pet food as human food because of toddler grazing happens in the kitchen. Adults are feeding their animals, so they're touching the food, touching the serving bowls. In the same location, they're also prepping human food. And we do have circumstances where you have at least micro cross-contamination in the kitchen from a contaminated pet food onto human food. So does that mean that pet food manufacturer has to be compliant with the food allergen law? I don't think I've ever seen an enforcement action from FDA on such question.
Right. It's going to be an interesting one. Yeah.
But I do know some brand owners are allergen sensitive with their products. Not that they think that humans are routinely consuming it. It's just they're trying to protect their brand.
Yep. Absolutely. So part of this, right, is you have to be able to parse all of this information. So here, guys, is the locals link. So you can go and find that document and go through that yourself. It's a good read. It's worth the time. So let's kind of bring this back up as we're running out of time here, Doug. And any closing thoughts you'd like to leave everybody with?
Well, I would just ask those of you on the call today, please do what you can to protect my family, because I'm not enthusiastic about losing one of those members because an allergen was out of control in the products that we're producing.
Yep. Well said. And my closing thoughts around this are, this is all about risk management. And as we go through this here today, and we're talking about allergens, what we're discussing and how you need to be looking at this is not something that's going to be answered with a 10 or 15 question audit checklist, right? This is nuanced. This is technical, and it needs to be figured out from a risk standpoint for your company of what you need to be looking at. And that really segues into my new project that I've launched here. I have a pilot program where I'm looking for, and this is where I'm asking everybody who joins me for these chats for your help. I've created a new risk management assessment program, and I'm looking for a company that's cutting edge, who wants to go to that next level for this and develop those systems associated with that as part of this program. And of course, with a pilot program, right, you get to be first in the door to try this. So if you know of a potential candidate out there who would like to apply for this and work with me on this, I'd love to hear from you. So of course, my email, right here. So reach out to me. This is a brand new way of looking at things, and this is not an audit, right? This is going to get you the information you need to manage risk and food safety in your company. So with that, everybody, thanks. Great chat, Doug. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Good seeing everybody.
Yeah, and of course, everyone here, awesome questions as well. We do this for you, and I love the participation on the chat every single week. It just gets greater and greater, and thank you for investing your time, everyone, and being here with us. We really are glad that you're helping to protect Doug's family. So with that, we'll bring the chat here to a close for this week. And of course, guys, we're back here next week. Same time, same bat channel, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, where I'll bring out another amazing guest like Dr. Marshall on the show. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a good time. Snow's coming here in Colorado, so we got to run around here pretty quick and get things done before that arrives. But hopefully no snow for Tim in Tennessee. Hopefully that's all done. So have a good time, everybody. Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.